right, guys. Appreciate you bearing with me here. Oh, here we go. Did we get it? Did it work?
Hi.
We did it. Hey. I'm always just happy when Instagram Live behaves, you know?
Time I did this, okay, so like being like a tech person, like I care about setup a lot and like camera quality and lighting and all that stuff. And it's like it's so far into the pandemic that there's no excuses. So last time, okay, I'm so worried, and like my son's nursery is like right beside my office. So I took a live from my bedroom, and I didn't know the whole time my camera quality was off. Like it was like so bad. I don't even feel like reposting it. So this time,
Yeah, you look fine to me. Your sound's cutting out a tiny bit, but you're not blurry or anything or stalling out as far as I can see. So I think is that good? So folks are trickling in. I just to set the stage a little bit. So I'm gonna just do a quick little intro on the Leap. Welcome to folks who are coming in here, and then I'll introduce you, who you are awesome. So people are excited, and then we'll just jump right into some of these questions if that works for you. So welcome to people who are coming in here. If this is your first time, welcome to this week's episode of The Leap. I'm Rachel Renock. I am the co-founder and CEO of Wethos, which is a platform that helps freelancers team up and form what we're calling virtual studios. So we make it really easy for you to price and scope complex projects and then split payments and manage your banking and payment stack. Every month, I catch up with a new person on Instagram Live. Arati is joining us as one of our judges for the current pitch competition, which is super exciting. She also is an angel investor in Wethos, so thank you for that. And we're going to dive into a little bit more about her journey and taking the leap and some of her experiences throughout a bunch of different roles. So Arati's the founder and, or is a founder and angel investor. She recently left Shopify after about 7 years as the director of product marketing, which is I constantly just gleaning learnings from that experience, and has established that discipline and that craft from the ground up. So she also has co-founded a ghee-based skincare company called Ghlee. Ghlee, that's right? And is a founding partner of Backbone Angels, which is a new angel circle of Shopify folks. And she has currently backed over 30 companies, led 2/3 by diverse founders. So that is always music to my ears generally. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. I'd love to just start by, hearing directly from you, letting people know a little bit more about your journey and your days before Shopify running the agency.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, why don't we start at the agency? Because I feel like you're probably like will benefit from a little bit more of the agency experience. So I was like not someone who was in tech. Early on in my career, I thought I was going to be just like a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. And I moved to Ottawa thinking like it was going to be like the West Wing. Lobbying, especially for a nonprofit, is very slow. So I moved back to Toronto.
Oh no, your sound. Oh, there you are. Yeah, you're back.
I was like, not right now. Parents. Yeah, so I moved back to Toronto because I felt like there was something happening in the creative side of business. And I met my husband and his co-founder who started a digital design agency, a UX agency. And this was like, over 10 years ago when there was some agencies that were only focused on UX, but it was a very novel thing, right? Like especially in Toronto where we didn't necessarily.
Hey, your sound is cutting out a bit. I don't know if that's a Wi-Fi issue or a microphone. Now you're back. Yeah.
Sorry, if my dad keeps going, I gotta tell him to chill out.
It's okay.
Yeah, so I was like swung into in the tech scene and in the startup scene, and it was just like this whirlwind. But we were still running an agency, right? And so we were building products and we were doing marketing websites, and it was very much like a digital studio, but it was still an agency. And so I learned a lot about how to manage projects, how to look at client work, things that, you know, we talk about often in our one-on-ones, which is like, there are so many pain points around running an agency, figuring out like how much you want to charge per hour, how do you want to figure out like how much you should be growing your team, how many projects you should take on. And so when I joined my husband and his co-founder, my husband was our salesperson and my co-founder, he was our CD. And I was kind of the person in the middle figuring out like all the operations, which is why I'm like so passionate about your product, because this is how all studios should be run.
Thank you.
Yeah. So like after 4 years of doing that, we were acquired by Shopify. So it came in through acquisition very early, one of Shopify's first acquisitions when no one really knew what Shopify was, especially my parents who keep calling. And yeah, that's how I got started at Shopify, and being someone who's a bit of a Jill of all trades team pretty early on, and got to do a lot of really fun stuff. And yeah, I got to build product marketing from the ground up.
Yeah, I actually, if you're open to it, would love to ask a little bit more about the acquisition. I've talked to a lot of other people in the space on the freelancer agency side, and are wondering like, what does an exit look like for that kind of a business? Any thoughts or learnings from going through that acquisition process, or like how it came about, or if people are, I don't know if that's kind of a landing people are looking for?
Yeah, I think, you know, services businesses are hard. And so I think acquisitions can be like appealing. I think the reality is with a services business, like you can be profitable too. So yeah, there's like opportunities for merger as well if you really like what you're doing. The way that I see acquisitions when it comes to like a services play is it's a talent thing. It's a little bit more of an acqui-hire. We were lucky we had a product under our belt as well. And so we were kind of already like playing around with product. That's actually why my husband and his co-founder really wanted to sell to Shopify, because we were all ready to be in a product company now. Like I think we had been on the other side and we're like, we need skin in the game. And I think that was the phase of everyone going in-house too. And now I feel like there's a little bit of because of the Great Resignation, everyone's now trying to figure out their own. Well, it's like ebbs and flows, right? With it's like this. So that was the point when everyone wanted to like kind of go in-house to product companies. And so I think the way to think about it is like, you know, it's more of a talent play. It's a product company or a tech company can easily build up a team. And so if acquisition is your final goal, like you should really figure out how you're positioned and how your people are positioned. Like we kind of did that inherently even before acquisition was ever a goal, where we created a niche for ourselves, which was, hey, we're not a large agency. We're not just going to do your brand or your marketing. We're really going to be embedded. We're going to, at that time, no one really knew how to design mobile websites or like mobile apps. Like that was the time where everyone was like, UX is important in mobile. It's going to be differentiation. But no one knew how to do it. And that was kind of our niche. We were like, we're going to behave like your product design team and like your embedded team. You're not even going to feel like we're someone else. And I think that differentiation really helped us in acquisition, because it did show that we were very tech forward as an agency, which I think sometimes like when you run a services business, there is a little bit of a bias. Like there's a bias that's like basically like, oh, you're not tech enough, you know, or it's like, oh,
totally.
I don't know. But I think we did a really good job of differentiating ourselves, which I think ended up working out not just for like the acquisition, but for our personal brands as well. And then I think actually like our career Shopify and post Shopify.
Yeah, and when you got in the door at Shopify, like what was that experience like for you in terms of like even expectation versus reality of like, you know, I know some founders in the tech space call it, I think it's like the golden handcuffs or something. And it doesn't sound like they were handcuffing you because you were there for such a long time, but yeah, like what was this experience kind of like, you know, getting into that culture and feeling that, you know, there's such a big difference between running your own thing and being inside of a company running your own thing.
Like Satish is still at Shopify, and he was one of like Jack Cooper's founders that was acquired, and this is what going to be his like 10th year there. Like it's kind of
awesome.
I think when you're being acquired, you have to really figure out what you're doing it for and why. And I think a lot of people when they go through acquisition or when they're at a point where they want to sell, it's for the money, or they want to get out, or they want to give their team an exit. But for us, we were like, I think we were kind of at the height of what we were doing, and we could have kept going, right? And so for us, it was all a learning thing. We were like, we're going to learn a lot being in this type of company. I also think it's like stage of acquisition, right? Like, I think if I was bought out by Facebook today, I probably would not want to stay either, because you're just in a really, really large company, right? And so for me, like, the best part about coming in at Shopify at that time, which is like, I think I'm employee 290, right? Like, or I was employee 290. And so I had a chance to almost be on the rocket ship, but also build it. That's what it is when you are acquired by a company that's still growing and still scaling. And so I think that's really something that people should think about if they're looking at acquisition, which is like, hey, if you're going to be there for the next 3 years, which, you know, most of contracts or the way acquisitions work, it's like 3 to 4 years, then what are you going to be doing during that time? And like, it's all opportunity cost in my perspective. And I thought I would not stay at Shopify past 5 years, and I stayed longer than I thought I would, because I was continuing to learn.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think, yeah, I always say, like, I'm like, if you don't define what success looks like for yourself, then you'll never win, because then you're just relying on these like externalities or validation from other people about, you know, what a successful exit might look like, or what, you know, is it not necessarily a bad thing if you want to run your business for the next 10 years. Like, I think that it's super important to think through those things before you go through that acquisition period. Otherwise, you can get jerked around a lot, I think, in that regard.
Yeah, and I think it's also, you know, I think a lot of people are contemplating quitting their jobs right now, or they're running like their side businesses, or they're freelancing. And I gotta say, it's like, you have to be really clear about what success looks like to you, like you said, because for me, you know, quitting for me was even harder, because, you know, you're attached to a name like the company that I worked for, and people were like, why would you ever leave? And so you have to be really clear about what success looks like to you, at all stages, whether you're going into a company or you're leaving.
Yeah, for sure. In terms of like your time at Shopify, I mean, the world of marketing has changed so much in the last 10 years. Like, when I worked at big agencies, it was I left in 2016, I think it was. And even then, like, things were just so different. I think Facebook was still like pushing video on everyone, which sounds like there's a resurrection of that happening. But yeah, like, what, from your perspective, like, how do you think things have evolved, you know, in your time there? And then, like, what are some things that you think maybe are no longer relevant or might come back around when it comes to the world of marketing?
Yeah, you know, I saw this question in your notes, and I was thinking about this because sometimes I feel like I'm an elder millennial. Like, I'm an elder millennial, so
What's the cutoff for that? I might be one too.
I don't know, but like, I'm 37. I'm turning 37 this year, so I'm like, I consider myself an elder millennial. And so for me, I think all marketing is cyclical, and maybe I've seen like one cycle of it. Kabir's coming up for his bath time, so it's just gonna get loud. I'm just warning everybody.
No worries.
So I think for me, there's like things that are always consistent with marketing, and then there's tools and platforms that are going to constantly evolve and change, right? And I think the best marketers understand that, and they're like not tied to the execution. They're excited about their goals and their strategy, because anytime you're on a third-party platform, especially when we're doing marketing, it's risky, right? Like, we all kind of bet on IG, algorithm changes, everyone starts freaking out, right? Or like, now everyone, like, there's always going to be something new that the kids are into, and we're going to be too late on, right? Learning, and maybe this is like a sign of maturing, because if you asked me that like 5 years ago, I would have been like, this is over, or like, that's over, we can't do that anymore, that's not cool. And I think a sign of maturing is thinking about what's consistent. So here's what's consistent. I think what happened when the internet changed all of our lives was that community was like front and center, and it wasn't just community as in like the people who are physically around you, but now your community could be everywhere and you could connect with people all around the world that believed in what you are doing, right? And so I think that's going to be constant. And a lot of people ask me as an investor, they're like, oh, why are you still investing in D2C skincare brands? You're in like all the skincare brands. I'm like, yeah, the market's not saturated because there's an audience for lots of different products and solutions. And so as a marketer, you kind of need to remember that like your community is your number one ammo. How you reach them, how you change your like ad spend, all of that. Yeah, sure. Keep like iterating on it. But like your community is the number one thing. And I think like, especially this year, I'm talking to a lot of companies, especially the ones I'm an investor in, and they're like, hey, I think I'm going to move like 90% of my Facebook budget to community. And that's a big departure, right? Like, I think the thing that's changed the most is like, it was all Google spend, then Facebook spend, and then mix in IG, and then mix in like everything else you do on the web.
Paid search and all that. Like, yeah.
Now it's like I'm seeing so much of the budget and that pie go back into community, which to me is kind of exciting, right? Because it's going to show like who's going to last and who actually has like repeat customers. So I think that's like the biggest thing that's going to change. But I think the constant is like, who are you talking to? Who's your audience? Who's your community? I don't think that's ever going to change. And if anything, like with all the Web3 stuff going on right now, it's like it's even more important to like niche down into who your people are.
Yeah, totally agree. Question like that's kind of an offshoot of this, which is I think clients can be the guiltiest of the whole like everyone's on TikTok now, we got to get on TikTok. Any advice to people to how to like mitigate that or talk to your clients about, you know, just because there's a new channel doesn't mean we necessarily need to launch it. Like, how do you sort of handle that?
Yeah, I've been on both ends of that, and like currently, like I'm an investor, but then I also consult. And then also I have my own D2C skincare business. So it's like with agency, I'm like, what's happening? What are we doing on TikTok? And then on the flip side, I'm like, it's okay. Just stay focused. So I think like as anyone who, regardless if you're an agency owner or a freelancer or you're just in client services, I think sometimes you have to give the reins to your client. Like if they really want to test out a new channel, especially when it's something that's so new or something like TikTok, I think because like your own personal voice is so important on a new channel, I kind of push it back to them to say, great, I want you to create your first reel. I want you to create your first TikTok, and then let's see how it performs. And this is how then we're going to like come up with a strategy, fix it, learn from it. I often find like agency owners and like people on the other end, especially if they're more junior, they kind of just say like, okay, great, we'll test something out. And it's like, no, let them do the work a little bit, because what we learned from like all these new channels is like, if it's not coming from the person, if it's not coming from the founder or from the brand, like it's just going to fail. Right. And I think young people understand that really well. So you just kind of like put it back to them.
Yeah, the level of desire for authenticity is like through the roof, even more so than it was when I was in advertising, which was like back in the day, the big thing was like everyone wanted to be the freaking Oreo tweet at the Super Bowl where they're like, you can't dunk in the dark. That stupid fucking tweet. No offense to anyone who might have worked on the Oreo stuff. Like, awesome. Like, good for you. Like, I love that. But I swear to God, I heard about this Oreo tweet for like years. Everybody wanted to have their viral moment and et cetera, et cetera. And like, all that context really matters, right? Like they were able to insert themselves in a conversation in a very authentic and relevant way. And you can't manufacture that, you know, if you're working on like whatever, a tampon brand who suddenly wants to have their Oreo moment. And you're like, well, that means something different to every brand, you know?
Yeah, I also think like social listening at the end of the day needs to be whoever owns that brand voice. Whether it's like if you're on client side and you're literally managing the Twitter, like at the end of the day, you need to kind of be that, like, you need to do the social listening. And I think social listening is like probably the most underrated marketing skill, where sometimes I talk to brands or like founders and they have no idea like what's going on in their world. And like, because I'm such an intense stalker of everything on social media, like I'm just like, no, you're not. Are you not on Twitter? Like, I'm like, how do you about your industry? Or I talked to this one like fashion brand one day, and they were trying to sell in India, and they were so excited about like this like market, and I was like, great, here's like 17 amazing like new age Indian brands. And I was like, they sell at these retailers and like fashion girls like this, and there's like Diet Prada, but in India we have Diet Sabya, which is like he's like a big designer, and that's like their parody account. And I was like, yeah, like Diet Sabya talks about it all the time, and they had no idea who that was. And I was like, oh my goodness, like you're not doing any social listening. And so I think like especially if you're on client side, force your client to do social listening. And then the biggest thing from the Oreo tweet that I always think about when it's like always inserting yourself in like a timely conversation is like give the reins to someone who gets it. Like just give up control and let them have it.
Yeah, half the battle of none of like I worked on like Hershey's and a few other big brands like that. And, like we never had our Oreo moment because they required like 3 or 4 approvals or something before anything could happen. And then at this point, this pace of everything is like, oh, and it's over, and we missed it. So in terms of like, so you've been at a bunch of these different kinds of businesses, both like running them, servicing them. We've got service-based agencies, we've got like product-based skincare, technology-based software. What are some of the takeaways about starting and growing the different types of businesses that you think are going to be helpful, I guess? Like, did you find that the tactics or strategies or fundamentals were very similar or different across those things?
Yeah, I think in services-based businesses, like, I don't know, sometimes I meet people who are in services-based businesses and I'm like, are you happy? Like, is this what you want to be doing with your life? And I think there's a special kind of skin that you need if you're going into a services-based business, which is like, you have to love like service. And like, I love, like, this is why I loved actually when I was running experiential at Shopify. I think I loved it the most because I love service. And I love like the details around service. And I think when you are running a agency client side business, like you gotta love that client relation stuff. Like you gotta love like how detailed and organized your email is. And you like I remember at Jed Cooper, like we used to geek out on like our new PDF and our deck style. Right. And it was like that used to be like an amazing moment when we're like, we cleaned up this deck and we're gonna present it this way. And like even like the finesse around the presenting, like you have to love those details if you want to be in a services based business, because that's what's going to like push you ahead of everyone else. Like I've worked with some freelancers who like barely don't even want to talk to you over email, and it's fine if they're doing something small, but if they're taking over like my website, like we're going to have lots of conversations, and a lot of those conversations are going to be feelings based because it's like my brand, right? And so
totally
have to be like into that, right? And I think this is what I loved actually, and it's pretty transferable if you work in services and then you go and work at a founder-led company, whether that's like a D2C brand or a product or whatever, is like when you work at a founder-led company, it's the same thing as being in client services where you're executing on their behalf, and it's like their vision, right? It's like you can have as much autonomy as you want, but it's the founder's vision. And that's what I don't know, I kind of love that. Like I think that's what makes a good marketer too, where I'm like, hey, I'm not the product, like I'm excited to market the product. You have to love finesse, and you have to love service, and you have to get really, really excited about someone being really emotional about their brand. Like sometimes I work with people and they're like, like this is like, I need more factual stuff. And it's like, okay, great, let's get through like factual information. But you have to know that someone who started this business in their closet at home, and they have boxes all around their house, and their kid is running around the boxes, and then they're running to the like post office to go like send out orders, and they're doing shipping labels. I'm like, this is inherently emotional for them. So you have to be okay with that. Like you can't be short with someone who's like so passionate about what they're doing. So I think it's like a different level of like care. And I think when you're starting your business, you have to know that. Like, or you're going to burn out, or you're going to be like, why am I doing this? Like, if you can't get your team excited about doing that when you're starting out, like what's the point? And I just see a lot of that in freelancers these days where I'm like, you need to know what you're getting into, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like there is no business where there's a mutual success, I think, closer than like a service-based business where the client's success is your success and vice versa. And I think like people are so emotional inherently that most of the time when I'm running into blocks, or when I have run into blocks with clients in the past, it ends up actually being more of like an emotional block than it is an actual obstacle. So like when they can't make a decision on the colors for their brand or the fonts or something like that, that feels very like, okay, we've got to make a decision so we can move forward, to you maybe in your day to day, to them is such a huge thing. And it's wrapped in a lot of different emotions about how they themselves are represented. And I think you have to be comfortable like unpacking some of that sometimes. Like sometimes when I used to get on the phone with clients when they were in like a tough place, or we needed to make a tough decision or something like that, I would just start the conversation off by like, just tell me what is keeping you up at night the most right now. Like when you wake up at 2 a.m. and you're like panicking, or I got to solve all my problems today, like what is the number one thing that sort of rises to that list, and start there. And I think that helps them kind of like work through those emotional blocks without you having to turn around and be like, this is an emotional decision, isn't it? Like people don't necessarily want to be told that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I learned this when we were doing like kind of business modeling on the agency side, where if you know someone is at that infancy stage, just like added 3 more revision rounds and try and be upfront about it, right? Like I actually think people would be like a little bit more into that upfront rather than like in an emotional moment, right? It's like if there's already a blocker and then you're adding more to the scope, you're like, wait, what? Like, no. So it's like if you're like, you have to be able to gauge what kind of client this is going to be. And if you're working with people who are at that infancy stage and you're also just starting out your business and you're probably a little bit emotional, like it's probably better to just think about how you want to build this person, how you want to charge for like the hours of revisions and rounds. And like sometimes I feel like honestly client services is like therapy, and like book that in, right? And it's your job as like the person on the other side to be able to have that conversation like you said, and it's your job to correlate the emotions with the color, right? It's like what's keeping them up at night is their business doesn't come off as trustworthy, and so your designer, let's say you are working on the brand, needs to know that. And then your designer can be like, okay, if we want to invoke trust, maybe let's use more blues and greens, because like psychologically those are colors that invoke trust, right? Or they're not feeling like they are differentiated enough, and so you show them like 5 brands and then you're like, this is why we're going to use this tomato red because is using it and you're going to stand out, right? Or okay, you want to come off more sophisticated, you feel like people aren't taking you seriously, let's use like this type of font style, right? And so it's your job to like kind of get through the psychology of a lot of that. And I think a lot of people who are just starting out in services business don't get it.
Yeah, because I think to that point, like a lot of people just don't have the vocabulary to give feedback that is clear either. So it's like they literally just don't know how to describe what they want, like I don't like when they start hearing stuff like, especially a designer, if start hearing stuff like, I don't like this, or this isn't quite right, like that's not going to be enough direction, like I don't like this could be a million things. And so you have to kind of sit down and start to unpack what that actually means. Like, is the concern about how this communicates to your end customer? Is this more something that just on a personal preference level is not a style you're gravitating towards? Like just getting really good at, I think, being inquisitive and not jumping to assumptions or conclusions, and just asking good questions usually helps people like answer it for themselves, and then you can get more clarity.
Yeah, and listen, like some people don't have the EQ like for conversations, and that's where, I think like as our agency, I think we only fire. And so you also do have the power on the client side if you have a really rough client to end that relationship. But I do think you're right. It's like most people don't have the language to describe likes and dislikes, and they use like just vague language. And it's your job, especially like your art director or your creative director, to really understand like those feelings and turn them into fact, right? Yeah, I don't know. I could talk about this forever because like I still think that there's a level of like how do I say this? Like, I think with like design projects or even like UI UX or even product, like I think that there's taste, and you need to be able to have that conversation with tact, right? Like
Yeah.
if someone has like really great style and like you can probably have that conversation a little bit easier, but I think taste plays into it. And then the other thing that plays into it, which like I have to check myself on all the time, like Rachel, I keep telling you, I'm an elder millennial. I'm like, oh, is that cool now?
Yeah.
No, like, and so like the people who work with me for me are like, Arati, that's not cool anymore. But like you have to create that environment as well. Where I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
not cool anymore. Okay, everything looks like it's from the 90s now. Awesome, got it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, people have to feel safe, like providing that feedback and opening those doors for them too. Because like, especially with some difficult clients, like some people you're just not going to be able to get over on your side, you know? And at that point, I think it also comes down to like that upfront vetting process of like, are you signing up a strategic partner? Is that how your client is seeing this relationship, or are they seeing you as somebody who just executes and they just want to basically give direct, you know, sort of orders to, and you have to decide for yourself what you do or don't want. Sometimes if you're really busy, the projects that are super easy where people are just like, just do da 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 and execute, like actually is great. It's much easier versus a big old strategic relationship that you have to then like, you know, really nurture and take care of.
Yeah, yeah. Especially when you're starting out, it's like kind of just get a lot of those under your belt. Like, why not?
Yeah, for sure. Got a couple minutes left, and I want to wrap up with some bigger picture questions around the future of freelance. What do you think, like, you know, the next 10 years sort of looks like?
Yeah, that's a big timeline.
I only think in decades now.
Um, like 1 year time frame now because of like the P word. I'm just like, I don't know what's gonna happen. So I'm just like, I'm like, I live in Canada. So like
What do you think will stay the same in the next 10 years?
people being terrible. Like
Great.
uh yeah, like I think yeah, I don't know. I think so there's a lot happening in the future of work. I quit my job, which I loved, to go out and do things on my own. And now I'm building brands and businesses, honestly, just with an army of freelancers, right? And I think the interesting thing that has changed is the leverage that freelancers have. Everyone wants to hire the good freelancers, but the best freelancers are the best because they're working on 7 amazing brands. And the more they work on these amazing brands, the better they get because they're getting input and feedback, and like the pace that they're working at is just amazing. And so I think the biggest change is like freelancers have leverage and they need to recognize that and they need to charge accordingly to it. And I think on the flip side, it's going to get really hard for companies to justify and slash convince talent to work for them. And so a lot of people probably like of my age and older, I talk to and they're like, oh, I can't convince people to work for me, or no one wants to work. Everyone just wants to like do things all day and go to Pilates class. Like, yeah, see, I'm doing a lot of unlearning on my end now that I don't have a full-time job and my co-founder is my younger brother who's like 27. And we have like a 9-year age gap, and he is teaching me a lot about the future of work where I'm like, wait, we don't need to have a fixed mindset. And so I hope that doesn't change. Like, I really hope we go into the next 10 years with a freedom now for the employee and more leverage in the employee's hands, whether if they're a freelancer or they're a contractor or they're full-time. I do think that there's going to be a little bit of a boomerang, and that's why I'm excited about a platform like yours, is because you can't get away from operational overhead. Like, that's the worst part of being a freelancer, right? And I think the hardest part actually about a freelancer is like HR and like benefits and figuring all that stuff out. And so I think ops is something that like at some point people are going to get like burnt out and they're going to be like, oh, I don't know, maybe I'll join a larger agency, maybe I'll go in-house somewhere. And so this is my Wethos plug because I love your product.
Thank you. Yeah, it is a grind though. I mean, like people have asked like, what's the number one thing that we're looking for from a judge perspective around like the submissions, and like I'm looking for the propensity for resilience, because that is to me the number one thing. Like half the battle is just not quitting, you know, like in starting of any business. And I think like I don't think there's any shame in rotating in and out of in-house or agency or on your own. I have a lot of friends who do stints, honestly, and then they go and hang out on an island for 2 weeks and don't do anything. I think that's one of the best things about that flexibility. And so like it also begs the question, I think, from just a government and like a legal standpoint too, you know, incorporation and all this red tape, like what does that, you know, start to look like in the future too? Because a 1099er, a person with a 1099 is an employee sort of still, but if you're incorporated as an LLC, you have a whole slew of other types of benefits that you can't be like pigeonholed into you know, a 1099 role. And so it's just an interesting thing too, from like a tax and a legal perspective as well, and how those systems and structures I don't think are quite prepared for the future either.
I don't think they're prepared at all, which is like, as you know, hyped or overhyped as like Web3 always sounds like. I'm like, there's actually like real changes that we need, and we do need to like decentralize a lot of it. I do think like, you know, the opportunity for any of your agency owners or like founders now who are thinking about like starting something, even if governments don't catch up in time, there's ways around it where you can hire the best people and you're not limited by like just hiring in your own region or country. So I think that's also what I'm looking for. And that's what I look for even like outside of judging. Like that's what I look for in founders too when I make an investment. I'm like, how can you attract talent, and can you attract the right talent? And I just don't think like people have the excuse anymore, because you can literally attract talent from anywhere around the world. And I'm probably speaking more to my Canadian contingent here, because like I was just talking to a reporter today around like the booming Toronto tech scene, and I think that's happening because you can work from anywhere and work for anyone. So I hope that like fixed mindset, I think that's really important to like shed really quickly. I don't think our governments are going to shed it anytime soon though, but I think like there's a lot of interesting things that agencies look at.
Yeah, and actually we have a bunch of employees in Canada and Toronto, so tons and tons of tech talent there. Only like an hour from my hometown, Syracuse, flight at least. Too much snow. I was just there. Too much snow in Syracuse right now. So to sort of wrap things up a little bit, any advice for folks who are either thinking about taking the leap or they just maybe took the leap, that you think they should know, and as business owners and getting into freelance?
Yeah, I think for me, and this just goes back into, at the end of the day, I'm a product marketer. So I'm going to be looking for, how are you differentiating yourself? And I think if everyone is a freelancer now, how are you differentiating yourself? Like what's that leap for you? And I'm just like, I'm excited about people niching down lately. So I'm really excited about people just knowing exactly who their community is, exactly who their audience is, and like, what do they bring to the table?
Yeah, I hear that a lot from people who've even been in business for a few years now and are saying like, all right, I've gotten the lay of the land. I've sort of, for lack of a better term, like sprayed and prayed, you know, like did everything. And now I'm like, we're honing in on not just the niche that we can fill from a differentiation standpoint, but also what makes the most sense for our business from even an operational standpoint. Because I think a lot of folks are also realizing what types of projects and things, opportunities that give the best return without the biggest headache, which is obviously a factor too.
Yeah, I think differentiating yourselves and figuring out like industries or project types is really important, because that way, like, you're just going to be able to work with the types of people you want. Like if you're going to go out on your own, you should be able to live on your own terms. And so like, why slug it out again, you know?
Yeah. Why rotate around to projects that you're not super passionate about, I think is what a lot of people are starting to realize too. I think from like a niche standpoint, it's interesting too to build out that talent circle, because to your point at the beginning of this conversation, the reason you like got acquired, is about a lot of times people with a service-based business. And so not only if you can identify that niche, but then if you can have a network of, people who are really high-end experts in that area, that's going to just make the business that much more appealing, I think, if there is an exit in your future in general.
Yeah. Even the way exits are going with like private equity roll-ups, or like it's also like industry based as well. There's like the alcohol accelerators over there, and then there's like the D2C brands, and then there's like pure tech. And so I think it's important to know like where you want to land if that's your end goal.
Yep, totally. Oh, all right. Well, thank you so much for having us. Wow. I'm sorry. It's been a long day. For joining us. I'm like, we had you, I guess. I'm okay, everyone. Don't worry. I'm fine. Everything is fine. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been an awesome conversation. Super interesting to dive into some of this stuff. If people want to find you or any of the brands that you're working with right now, what's the best place for them to do that?
Just Twitter, just at Arati Sharma, not Arati Sharma.
Yes.
So I haven't made that jump. I don't think I'm going.
Come over to Twitter, where we're all unwell, and it is quite the place. All right. Well, we will be back next month with more episodes of The Leap. We're getting back into the swing of it. So make sure that you guys keep your eyes out, stay tuned. And we are announcing finalists and winners in the next couple of weeks here. So if you haven't yet submitted for the pitch competition and you want to, you still can until next Monday, so the 28th. And then we will start to roll out some of those finalists and winners. But thank you all so much for joining us, and have a great evening. And thank you again for joining.
Much. Bye.